CBS News contributor Ed O'Keefe is with us now from Washington. He's a congressional correspondent for the Washington Post. Ed, good morning, and let's start with that speech. Listen, this was his 8th campaign-style rally since he became president back in January, and it lasted 76 minutes. The first 20-plus minutes was bashing the press, and he was very selective in what he remembered and what he had shared on Saturday. So what do you make of the content and the tone?
You know, I think if folks tuned in and thought they were watching a repeat from 2015 or 2016, they could be forgiven for that, because there was a lot of what we saw from the presidential candidate Donald Trump last night play out yet again in a city that he's been to before and in a state that clearly has supporters that love him dearly. But look, beyond the media bashing, beyond the revisionist history of what he said in the wake of the Charlottesville violence, there was some real news in there. I think most especially the threat of shutting down the federal government should Congress not provide the money he wants to start expanding and building out the border wall along the border with Mexico. That is expected to be a real flashpoint when Congress comes back to town just after Labor Day and has only just a few days to figure out how to keep the government open and set spending levels going forward.
What are you hearing about how Congress is responding to that so far? I think a lot of jaws dropped at that remark.
Absolutely. And look, there are Democrats don't want to see that money set aside for a new border wall. There are a lot of Republicans who are wary of doing it as well. He spoke in a state last night where a majority of Arizonans don't think there needs to be a border wall. Ditto in Texas, and most of California already has one, or at least the parts that need it. So he wants to fulfill a signature campaign pledge. He expects Congress to deliver it for him. We'll see whether or not that happens, and it raises the prospects for yet another government shutdown beginning September 30th, October 1st.
It has only happened just a handful of times in the last century that the Republican Party has controlled the presidency in both houses of Congress. Yep. You have Wall Street, you have business leaders, all hoping that this president, this Congress will get something done. What does it mean that the president is essentially committing fratricide, screaming obscenities at the Senate Majority Leader, and then bashing 2 Republican senators in their own home state?
It means it's going to be very difficult for the Republican Party to demonstrate that they can run Washington and the federal government, especially as they face these big deadlines and these big items on their to-do list. You know, they got to start talking about tax reform. Their supporters expect them to do that. They want to do it. They've got to keep the government open after September. They've got to raise the debt limit by October 1st as well. When the president's running around criticizing Republicans, swearing at them on the telephone, and generally raising concerns about whether they have America's best interest in mind, it's going to be very hard for the White House to work with Congress.
But Ed, what are you learning from your own reporting? I mean, we heard the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, indicate just this week that it's going to be much easier to get tax reform done. Are they close on that at all?
No. No, they're not. We don't know that they have a real big plan ready to go. And even if they do, it's going to take several more months before they can really get that ball rolling.
Ed O'Keefe, always good to hear your wisdom. Thanks for joining us this morning. Have a good one.
Take care, guys.